welcome to Connecting the Unbanked and Underbanked in the Philippines, a joint webinar between Eastern Communications and Kacific Broadband Satellites Group. My name is Gino Belgier from Kacific, and I will be your host for today's webinar. First and foremost, I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us as we hear from industry experts on the topic of connecting the unbanked and underbanked. I encourage all our participants to make use of the Q&A function in your Zoom window if you have any questions throughout any of the presentations, which we will come back to during the executive Q&A at the end of the webinar. In today's program, you'll be hearing from Mel T. Poblasan, Director for the Technology Risk and Innovation Supervision Department of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, as he talks about the digitalization initiatives of the BSP towards financial inclusion. We'll also be hearing from Jose Paulo M. Palileo, Vice President of Luzon Rural Banking Association in the Philippines, who will discuss serving the unbanked and underbanked in the country. Later in the program, we'll be hearing from Edsel Paglinawan, Head of Products of Eastern Communications, who will share with us the importance of connectivity to bridge the unbanked and underbanked. And last but not the least, Mr. John Loke, Deputy Chief Technology Officer of Kacific Broadband Satellites Group, who will take us through how satellite connectivity can link rural branches in the Philippines effectively and securely. But before we dive into today's exciting lineup of guest speakers, to formally open our program, I would like to call on screen our Chief Executive Officer and founder of the Kacific Broadband Satellites Group, Mr. Christian Paturao.
Thank you, Gino. And thank you, everybody, for your time for attending this webinar. It's an honor for me to present Kacific and introduce our collaboration with Eastern Communications. We're very excited that we are entering this high-profile partnership with such a reputable partner in a very important market like the Philippines. Let me tell you a little bit about Kacific. Kacific is a company that I founded 8 years ago. We are a satellite operator. We own and operate the most powerful satellite in the region. We cover Southeast Asia. We cover the Pacific. We cover parts of South Asia as well. But right in the middle of our coverage, we have one of the most important markets for us, which is the Philippines. The Philippines has, as you know, many islands, very difficult terrain, lots of remote and rural locations and communities that need to be integrated into the digital economy of the Philippines. And that is exactly the type of market, the type of needs that our satellite addresses. Our satellite is called a high throughput satellite. It is designed specifically to deliver high speeds bandwidth. It was designed and blueprinted by our teams, but then it was manufactured by Boeing and later on launched on a SpaceX rocket from Cape Canaveral on the 16th of December 2019. So we're coming to about 2 years of the anniversary of our launch. Since then, since its launch, the Kacific One satellite has literally revolutionized the connectivity of rural areas of Southeast Asia, and in particular of the Philippines. What we do, we essentially inject our bandwidth, high-speed bandwidth, high-quality bandwidth at the heart of where that bandwidth is most needed. That is especially to communities, enterprise, government services of rural and remote locations. We provide that connectivity primarily to connect to the internet. We believe that the internet actually changes lives and is what is most needed. Lots of other satellite operators are focusing on network solutions, but what we are focusing on is really the internet, VPN network, and everything connected to broadband, which is what fuels really the engines of these rural and remote locations, which are SMEs that are operating in these locations. Of course, banks are one of these engines. Without banks, the economy stalls. People cannot have the fuel for their daily life for fueling these engines of economy, which are their jobs, of course, and the companies that they're working for. So we are very excited to provide our solutions revolving around broadband to making sure that the banks can provide the right services through their connectivity. What we believe generally is that there is only one internet. There is not the internet for the cities and the internet for the rural areas. We believe that there's only one YouTube, there's only one Zoom, like we having this call today on. There's only one type of social services or social media. We all using these platforms wherever we are. And if we don't provide the right quality of that service wherever people are, in the end, people are not going to use these services. So to us, when we designed our satellite from the get-go, we had that idea of one internet in mind. Wherever people are, they should be able to access the right quality of service at the right price to make sure that they can actually access all these services. So we're very excited that we are actually growing in the Philippines, and that this collaboration with Eastern Communications will actually provide another impetus into our presence into the Philippines. We actually looking at the future for our first satellite. We have already raised $227 million for launching our first satellite. The second satellite that we already have in mind is leading us at the moment to raise another $300 million to provide an excellent additional service both in the Philippines and the extended region of Southeast Asia. So we're looking at the future. We will make sure that as we ramp up our capacity on our first satellite, a second satellite will be there to continue our story of growth and of providing excellent and affordable service in rural areas, and especially to the financial sector and to the bank branches. And with that, I thank you all again for your time. I hope you will enjoy the discussions today, and I hand over to the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christian, for opening today's session and for giving our audience a wonderful context in terms of what to look forward to in our program ahead. Now, to begin our lineup of guest speakers, to talk about the digitalization initiatives of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas towards financial inclusion, where we'll hear about the challenges faced in improving the country's financial inclusion, the BSP's digitalization efforts towards financial inclusion, Executive Order number 127 on expanding the provision of internet services through inclusive access to satellite services, and the opportunities in reaching the underserved and unserved. I would like to call on screen the Director of the Technology Risk and Innovation Supervision Department of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Mr. Mel Labasan.
Hi, thank you so much, Gino, and good afternoon, everyone. Again, much Phil, and to your partners, Eastern Communications and Kacific, for this opportunity to speak about, actually to reiterate our initiatives on digitalization and of course, financial inclusion. Let me share my screen. Okay. I'm sure you are all familiar with how special financial inclusion is to the BSP. And actually, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas drive towards financial inclusion has always been an integral part of our efforts to achieve a well-oiled financial system. And as our economy transitions, let's say, as economy transitions into something that fully embraces digital transformation, the BSP actually supports all measures that will close the existing digital divide and equity in the provision of financial services, because we believe that technology or digitalization in general will of course allow financial institutions, like especially those that are located in remote areas, to broaden their client base or to tap additional sources of income or to achieve operational efficiency in their operations. And we believe that it's also for the consumers. I mean, the benefit for the consumers generally is the convenience of completing their transactions and access to wide array of financial products and services. Now, I'm sure you may have seen all of this. This is just to reiterate that the BSP's digital payment transformation roadmap, which has twin objectives. The first objective really is to ensure that 70% of adult Filipinos have access to transaction accounts which they can use on a day-to-day basis, and that 50% of our retail payment transactions will be converted to digital by the end of 2023. Now, I would just like to share here some statistics related to the state of digital payments and financial inclusion in the Philippines. Now, during the first quarter of 2021, we have already achieved 20% of digital payment. Total retail payment transaction to digital, and 87% of government transactions. Government payments. It's already digital. That's around 319 billion pesos. We have also seen 87% increase in electronic fund transfers, and even payment to merchants has already increased by 66%. And this is expected to further grow as we fully adopt the national QR code for merchant payment, small value payment, and this is also encouraging. 53% of adult Filipinos now have transaction accounts based on our latest data. And we have also seen that 23% Filipinos already have prepaid and debit cards, of course, which also they can use for transacting. Now, I'm showing you here some of the opportunities when it comes to digital financial services. And again, we have a high mobile penetration rate because 69% of Filipinos have 1 or 2 mobile phones. But unfortunately, also, it means 7 out of 10 Filipinos that are unbanked actually have a mobile phone. This is also a good indicator. This shows that we can possibly reach those 7 that have mobile phone by offering digital financial services, either through mobile banking or internet banking services. Now, we all know that one of the challenges when it comes to financial inclusion in the Philippines is really internet connectivity, especially to those financial institutions that are located in far-flung areas. So that's why we fully support the recent Executive Order 127, which of course allows small players or other players to operate satellite broadband facilities and of course serve far-flung rural communities. With this, hopefully, if the government, the NTC or other government agencies and the players themselves are able to execute this properly, we can have access. The rural banks in far-flung areas can have access to fast, reliable, and affordable internet. Hopefully affordable. Now, again, because of this Executive Order 127, we expect, again, I mentioned about the bridging the digital divide in the country. because it enables deployment of infrastructure for areas that are currently underserved or unserved by the major players, particularly the telco players. And it can also help uh, it can also help fast track financial inclusion in these areas, because financial institutions will now be able to let's say deploy more ATM terminals, or probably have branch light units, or engage in cash agency arrangements, or the rural banks themselves can offer mobile and internet banking facility. Now that this is the last slide, and again, while there have been positive developments when it comes to digital payment and financial inclusion in the Philippines, we know that we still have a lot to do, particularly when it comes to one of the areas that we still need to further improve on is on the financial literacy space. We're working on that, and I'm sure and this initiative, let's say to offer satellite services, I guess will broaden, will improve access to internet connectivity, which is a prerequisite to financial inclusion and digital financial services. And the digital transformation that we are witnessing right now somehow provides a reassuring sense of society wherein everyone is financially included. So from facilitating access to transaction accounts to providing, let's say, efficient retail payment systems, and even networks like the InstaPay and PesoNet, the BSP remains steadfast in our commitment to providing an enabling regulatory environment, of course, that harnesses innovations to allow financial services to be accessible to all Filipinos. That ends my presentation. Maraming salamat po.
All right, thank you so much, Mel, for that very insightful presentation and giving us an overview of where we stand in terms of financial inclusion in the Philippines today. So for our next speaker, we will hear about the landscape of the unbanked and underbanked, why it is important to connect them, and how connectivity can impact them, as well as the opportunities in the unbanked and underbanked market. I would like to call on screen the Vice President of Luzon Rural Banking Association in the Philippines, Mr. Jose Paulo Palileo.
Good afternoon. Share my screen. All right. Thank you for that introduction. I'll proceed. So I was asked to give an overview of the unbanked and underbanked economy or situation in the country. So I'll begin. So as far as geographic outreach is concerned, there are of the entire geographic area of the Philippines, 68.8% have existing banks, and 26.6% of this area of the rest of the country might not have a bank, but probably have an ATM or a POS outlet. No? So which gives access to about 95.4% of the entire geographic location of the country. As far as formal banking is concerned, 75 municipalities, or 4.6% of the entire country, remains without access to any formal financial service, no? Be it from banks or non-banks. As far as deposits and credit is concerned, data has shown that more or less half of people have savings, no? And only half, or 51%, a drop of 17.3% from 2017 data, show that these people keep their money at home, or they don't have accounts in banks. No? Only 21% of people have savings accounts. And with regard to credit, 54% still borrow from informal lenders. So they don't deal with the formal sector. They don't deal with banks. They would rather probably borrow from family members or in some cases loan sharks. And this is considering that 33% of adult Filipinos have loans. Next. So as far as opportunities are concerned, so considering the seemingly low penetration of the formal banking sector to most of the country, what are the opportunities that we can actually see? One is that 99% of established businesses in the country are either micro or small. All right, and most of these micro businesses are located in far-flung rural areas, and most of the large and medium enterprises are concentrated in the more economically advanced cities and areas. No? So most rural banks and some cooperative banks, most of them are located in these far-flung areas. So this is an opportunity because of the volume of business that these people can provide. Also, we have to consider that microfinance lending is considered by the government as the last mile when it comes to lending. And this is evident by the volume of credit that is extended to this particular sector. These are oftentimes small business owners, micro business owners, and sometimes farmers. For banks, you have 26 billion pesos as of the first quarter of last year, lending to 2.1 people, individuals. But compare, that's the formal, really formal, these are banking institutions. But for cooperatives, you have 9.2 people borrowing or depositing, and then you have 307 billion pesos in terms of loans, and 41.9 billion in terms of for microfinance NGOs. No? So what does this tell us? Well, this tells us that there is a market in the far-flung areas. There is a need for credit and savings and financial services in areas outside of the urban centers. And these are being serviced not by banks, but by NGOs, predominantly by NGOs and cooperatives. And last, as already pointed out, touched on earlier by Mr. Plabasan, data has also shown that Filipinos in general are getting more tech savvy. They're 53% of adults have engaged or in the internet. We spend 9 hours on the internet, 3 hours on average on social media. And for transactions, 70% of internet users have purchased or transacted online. So what does this tell us? If you're able to connect the people in these areas, these microfinance clients, through technology that they already have, you're looking at a very, very profitable business opportunity, and an area that is very, very untapped as of the moment, considering that we're only looking at half of the people in the country and the number of transactions that banks are able to catch from this area. And as far as challenges are concerned, well, as tapped on also by the previous speaker, one of the issues is education. If only half of the population trust depositing their monies in, if less than half of the population would rather keep their monies at home, and with more than half of the population would rather borrow from informal sectors that lend out monies at usurious rates, that this is a question of, is it because of accessibility or is it because of just education? The government has taken initiatives to try to encourage participation of the unbanked. No, that they actually created the basic deposit account, encouraging banks, no, to soften or to lessen the requirements into basic opening deposits. No? But at the end of the day, aside from the end users, banks themselves also have to be educated. You see, at the end of the day, banks are businesses and they won't enter into areas that are not profitable. So it's a simple, it's a matter of educating them as well as to the opportunities that are available in far-flung or rural or unbanked areas. And as far as infrastructure is concerned, well, there is an 86% mobile broadband penetration. But the question here is how reliable is this penetration? Speaking from actual experience, there is a signal, there is a broadband signal, but the question there is the reliability and the speed of the said signal, which sometimes disallows us from offering digital services to our clients. So there's a certain bandwidth that you have to maintain in order, for example, for your ATM machine to run properly. And but it is very encouraging considering the number of people that are already online and actively using digital services and products. And with regard to competition, yes, so 51% still save at home and 54% borrow from informal lenders. This is where I guess education really has to come back in. You can't compete if the people that you talk to aren't aware of really what you can offer. And as far as our experience with the government is concerned, they are doing their part. They are launching and they have been using various platforms, online, social media, and all that to try to educate as many people as possible. And I guess this is just a case of actual players, rural bankers included, to engage in trying to educate the client base as well. That ends my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jose Paulo, for that very insightful presentation in terms of the general landscape that we have in terms of the challenges, in particular the rate and reliability of broadband penetration that you mentioned, and more importantly, the opportunities of the unbanked and underbanked in the Philippines. Now, to share with us the importance of connectivity to bridge the underbanked and unbanked, I would like to now call on screen the head of products of Eastern Communications, Mr. Edsel Paglinawan.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, Gino, and thanks to all our attendees. We appreciate your time spending with us this afternoon. Okay, wow, it's about connecting the unbanked and underbanked in the Philippines. Very, very much aligned with our campaign in the democratization of technology in the country. And it's great to listen from Mr. Mel of BSP and Mr. Paulo of Rural Bankers Association of the Philippines about the initiatives of both the government and the Bankers Association in making it sure that we are able to support the needs of the unbanked and underbanked. And if I may just share a bit, minor trivia, more than 140 years ago, the first Philippine telecommunications company was born, and that was commissioned by Spanish government. And this is exactly the same company that first connected the country to the rest of the world. And as time progressed, and until today, Eastern Communications has actually been able to shape and reshape, discover, rediscover, recreate our value in the Philippine industry, and the rest is history. And we are creating another history today. We used to offer connectivity solutions before until a little bit over 3 years ago, Eastern Communications is able to demonstrate our innovation leadership by imputing the recent developments as part of responding to our market's call, and that's living our purpose. Yes, again, innovation with purpose. And I would like to share with you our excitement as we heed the call of democratizing our services, democratizing the technology across the country, regardless of the sizes of the business and regardless of what vertical you're in, especially in the banking industry. So today we invite everybody here. We invite you all to co-create more innovations with us and Kacific as we all continue to evolve the reason for being in the service. Allow me to share a very short clipping of my talk last year, just last year. This was addressed to the education sector, not banking though, but I'm sure we can all relate to this, especially with the education of our kids. Here, the news article or a clipping from the CNN Philippines that was posted a few days ago, highlighting or headlining students to share the SLMs, they call that self-learning modules, due to the lack of budget. Well, still, I consider this as a fortunate kid being able to use a transistorized radio in her learning experience. But that is the reality, not only in some of the provinces, but a lot of remote areas here in the Philippines. That is actually the reality. And I would like to share this also. This is coming from a friend of mine from my hometown in Oriental Mindoro. They are doing the dry run already for the radio-based instruction. So for the public schools, for those who can't afford or don't have the facility of doing the online education, so they do the modularized, meaning they print out the paper, they distribute the handouts to the students. And it's true pala, when we heard the president before talking about giving transistorized radio to the families in the remote areas. Yes, it is happening. And even again in my own hometown, I can see these teachers practicing already for the radio-based instructions. This is good. If you may want to listen to this very quickly.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kayo po ay nakikinig sa DZRS 91.5, the new Vision FM of the Lugod National High School sa programang Happy Tips Teacher, now on air. Kasama pa ito ang inyong lingkod, Teacher Ana Marie, nakikinig sa ating dapat lahat happy, sama-sama tayo maging happy. At ako naman si Teacher Aiza Mateo or Teacher Zia na nagpapaalala, kumain ng tama, huminga ng malalim, lumayo sa mga saninang problema, maging masaya lang.
Now this picture may break your heart. We can see here the picture of some Mindoro-based teachers assigned to teach to our indigenous people, our beloved Mangyan from Mindoro. And notice that the printouts being distributed during the dry run of their new normal, or maybe I should say it's the interim normal. They print out the modules on their own. They solicit money from those who can afford to give some sort of budget for the printer and for the ink and for the bond paper supply. And then we can feel more how fortunate our kids are in enjoying the online education in the comfort of our homes, with good internet connection and with, here, heartbreaking, right? I don't sound so negative here, but would rather highlight that despite the many innovations around, I suggest to, pause a little and ponder on something that is also equally important. Yes, many technologies have already reached the so-called plateau of productivity. Well, that's the term used by Gartner for the mainstream adoption of technologies. But look around in our country. How many do not have the privilege of not being able to enjoy the benefits of technology? Even the basic internet and the banking benefits, right? That is exactly the great digital divide happening around, not only the Philippines, but in many countries as well, affected by the many factors, especially economy, lack of IT, infrastructure, telecom resources, lack of budget, I should say, and even the manpower and the like. So for me, I believe that there must be this conscious effort to make these technologies pervasive to all. And that is the innovation that we should have. And that is the innovation that should have that purpose. Apologies, but bear with me for being a bit more academic in here. Ephemeral or ephemeralization. Ephemeralization will definitely have a profound impact on the way we do business, as we have to rethink our approach to the next, and yet I should say better normal. Ephemeralization, that is a term coined by a US visionary and philosopher, Buckminster Fuller, who used to describe the tendency of technology to allow humans to do more and more with less and less until eventually you can do everything with nothing. Again, technology allows us to do more and more with less and less until eventually we can do everything with nothing. And actually what sounds like a visionary and philosophical statement is actually something that we have all been experiencing already.
Look into your pocket today, you'll see a smartphone. A smartphone with a dramatically more power, more computing power, more processing power, much more storage, whether it's in the same phone or somewhere in the cloud. And it's awesome, right? And that is a concrete example of ephemeralization. And this brings me back to our innovation with purpose. And I think we are reaching a new tipping point in here. A new tipping point in the deployment of technology in the Philippines. And I am inspired by this concept of democratization. There is a very strong parallelism between Fuller's ephemeralization and our vision of democratization, as we need to make technology available to many businesses, to many individuals in the Philippines. Technology allows us to democratize the delivery of solutions and experiences in the country. We, us, all of us, technology providers, should actually do our part in making that happen. And yes, we may be seeing that in the many vertical industries already today, but there are segments of the industry that need that innovation complemented by, I should say, affordability. And Eastern is executing, and we are crafting new programs like this one to reinforce the democratization in the country. And that is where we envision of the evolution in the Philippines, by which the access to technology rapidly continues to become more and more accessible to more people, more businesses, regardless of their geographic location. Very much in time with our internet via satellite, right? And this is our intent to make Eastern more borderless, our intent to serve the many unserved, to serve the many unbanked, to serve the many underbanked in terms of internet, cloud, and ultimately securing IT infrastructure, applications, and the data. And we make this happen in the most cost-efficient manner. Our partnership with Kacific is one of the many initiatives to engage this and to execute this and to accomplish all of this. And that is what I metaphorically call as the technology for sari-sari stores. Technology for sari-sari stores. This is getting more interesting, but let me talk about that in a while. Okay, technology that makes businesses perform better is just as astonishing because it makes so many things accessible to us than ever before. Democratization has created Airbnb. And when you look at something like hotels, democratization has actually created Airbnb so people can now be hotels. Airbnb democratized the hoteliers. And Airbnb also democratized hotel-like stays by making more people enjoy the hotel-like experience, which were used to be reserved only to the can afford individuals, right? And democratization has also created Shopify. In their website, you'll see empowering independent businesses, owners everywhere. So Shopify removed the many constraints in the past for the individuals to sell online. And this is also interesting. Democratization has created Grab, one of my favorite topics. It has changed the way we commute. And obviously, if you look at Grab, it has made the transportation much more accessible to many people. And democratized the taxi, or I should say rent a car, to many operators, to many individuals, right? And Grab Food, for example, well, also Food Panda. One of the most wonderful things that's happening today. Whenever I see a Kuya Grab driver, I feel so good that this platform has created employment and earning opportunities for many of our kababayans. And this platform also leveled the playing field. You have the option to buy a 350 pesos adobo from a known brand, or less than 100 pesos adobo from Nanay's Carinderia, right? And all of them can be found in the same application, leveling the playing field. That's really amazing. That's democratizing the services through technology. So we've seen how democratization has created Airbnb, has created Shopify and Grab. And I'm excited to share with you that at Eastern, we are democratizing the technology for sari-sari stores. Again, that's just a metaphor though. I think sari-sari store is the best metaphor that I can think of for the businesses, not just for the big businesses, but even for the small and medium businesses alike. Segments which need not only Eastern support, but yours in the banking industry, our partner in Kacific, as technology partners, as our customers. Well, for those who are not Filipinos here, the word sari-sari, it's actually a Tagalog word meaning variety. Such stores occupy a very important economic and social location in the Filipino community, and they are ubiquitous in our neighborhoods and along our streets. And sari-sari stores are actually not only a one-stop shop providing locals and of course some foreigners with everything that we need, from the daily food necessities, cleaning supplies, and even the phone top-ups, rice, milk, whatever. But these are a colorful cultural icon that brings our community together. Though this is just a metaphor, though, imagine enabling sari-sari stores with internet in the far-flung areas, enabling the sari-sari stores, quote unquote, with the data connectivity, with the cloud, with security, and even different business applications. So as such, especially the rural banks, we have all very essential role in the democratization of services in the Philippines. And we are one with you in making this happen as we roll up our sleeves and we continue to innovate and making that happen in the Philippines. We democratize internet by carefully curating routing to make them even more affordable, but ensuring the quality performance of any industries as well. And that's the reason why we have launched the IDS, well, that's direct dedicated internet access for cable TV operators and also for internet resellers, making internet available to the far-flung areas without any ISP, but with cable TV operators. But aside from that, we have just recently launched the Eastern VSAT, and this is in partnership with Kacific. So for those in the off-grid location without any telco facilities, or I should say on areas with limited ISP presence, we deliver internet access via satellite. That is exactly exciting. So what are the different use cases? These are just the basic use cases: standalone connectivity, internet to off-grid sites, standalone connectivity, or even redundant connectivity. There is a bank, there is a business out there with a single ISP, but you can't afford to go downtime, to have downtime. Then our solution as redundant connectivity is also another use case. And that MPLS via satellite, I should say, we're also prepared to serve your infrastructure to make your branches be part of your bigger MPLS network, last mile via satellite. And again, at this point, team, I invite you, or we invite you, our partners, our customers, to join us in this journey. Let our purpose of bringing back the human connection and making businesses prosper through our innovative solutions, our services, be part of your purposes as well, as we take initiatives in making technology available to all businesses in the Philippines. I invite you to be our co-creators of success. More and more solutions are coming up as we intend to make these technologies pervasive, available to everybody. And this is the history we are making today. Having goosebumps, honestly. Maraming salamat po. Let's all stay safe. Let's stay healthy. As I always say, let's keep on inspiring each other. Again, I'm Edsel Paglinawan. Magandang hapon po sa inyo lahat.
Thank you so much, Edsel, for that very engaging presentation where you touched on the, I hope I pronounced this right, ephemeralization and accessibility of advancing technology solutions to help serve our fellow countrymen in the Philippines by providing jobs and creating new opportunities. I would like to take the opportunity to remind our audience at this point that we do have a Q&A function, which you should see in your Zoom window, if you do have any questions you would like to address to any of our speakers this afternoon. And for those who plan to post or repost on social media, we do have our official hashtags that we invite you to use. Our hashtags are hashtag #StrongTouchdown, hashtag #Fearless2021, hashtag Eastern Communications, and hashtag the heart of broadband. So once again, our hashtags are hashtag strong touchdown, hashtag fearless 2021, hashtag Eastern Communications, and hashtag the heart of broadband. And to introduce our last speaker for today's program, who will be discussing how Kacific's solution can help to address security concerns, how Kacific can dedicate a gateway for the rural branches to connect or transfer the signal to HQ without compromise, and how KA band or CAB band helps to provide speeds and affordability, I would like to call on screen the Deputy Chief Technology Officer of Kacific Broadband Satellites Group, Mr. John Look.
Hi, good afternoon to all. I hope you can see my screen. My name is John Look. I'm the Deputy CTO for Kacific Broadband. I'm delighted that Kacific can be part of this session to share on what Kacific, together with its local partner, Eastern Communication, can use satellite connectivity to connect the unbanked and the underbanked in the Philippines. The previous few panelists has clearly outlined the lack of connectivity and also highlighted that with connectivity, what sort of opportunities are made available. Before I proceed to share the approach, allow me to provide a background of who Kacific is. Kacific Broadband Satellite Group is founded in 2013, backed by a group of experienced investors in international telecommunication infrastructure. 16 December 2019, we're close to 2 years now, Kacific launched its first geostationary satellite, Kacific 1 or K1, located at 150 East, slightly just above Papua New Guinea. Kacific 1 became operational on 27 January 2020, with coverage throughout Southeast Asia and Pacific Islands. It provides more than 50 gigabits of internet capacity, or over 12 gigabits of capacity just in Philippines island alone. Kacific vision is to enable businesses, governance, and communities to fully participate in the digital world through high quality, affordable satellite broadband access. We understand the need for affordable connectivity for areas that are underserved by terrestrial infrastructure that take years to build. We are here to make a lasting difference, to provide the infrastructure to communities, to see people's lives improve, drive economic growth, and use successful proven technologies to deliver cost-effective solutions to the underserved regions in the world. We also recognize that our service solution can complement existing terrestrial fiber infrastructure of developed countries due to the ease to deploy. Kacific 1 is the next generation of satellite technology. We call it HTS, or high throughput satellite. First in this region to operate a full KA band with 56 spot beams covering across multiple islands and landmass. We operate service through 3 strategic gateway or teleport in this region: Australia one in Indonesia, and another based off in Philippines. In the Philippines, the primary teleport is located at Subic Bay, while the diversity site teleport is at Clark. Kacific Broadband is a startup company, and we leverage on strength of our key strategic business partners to build and support this business. Just to name a few key partners in our successful journey: the satellite is designed and manufactured by Boeing, a US-based company that many of you may be familiar as manufacturers of airplane. SpaceX, our satellite launcher that operates the reusable Falcon 9. I think many of you are familiar with its owner, Elon Musk, clearly associated with Tesla electrical cars. Kratos, another US-based company that has years of experience building teleport infrastructure in this region. Now let's go into actually talk about how satellite connectivity can link rural branches in Philippines effectively and securely. For the banking and finance industry, connectivity is more important than it's ever been, with secure reliability connectivity being critical. Communications need to be assured, not just for ATMs or point of sales transaction, but also between the institutions, HQ, data centers, and branches itself. In Kacific's value proposition, there are three key elements here. The satellite infrastructure, which is here, Kacific 1, has an existing coverage over Philippine Islands. That means there's immediate availability of the service. And the second point here is actually the VSAT platform, the system that connects the remote site to the teleport in Subic. This platform has proven heritage to operate quite reliable and secure connections from the underserved sites to Subic Bay Teleport, and of course, from Subic Teleport itself, there are dedicated connectivity to the bank or finance institution HQ via local service operators, right? And clearly, the third key element here itself in our value proposition is a local established partner, Eastern Communication. So the key takeaway benefits of this value proposition are secure and reliable. Connectivity is scalable, so you can start off with a 10 megabits requirement, and you can grow up to 50, 30, 50, or even 100 megabits per site itself. The other point here is the ease of deployment itself. You do not need to build large towers, infrastructures, just a simple 1.2 meter antenna, which occupies less space, and is able to set up fairly quickly, even for special events, right? Just special events for fast recovery or banking or finance services during disasters. This way itself, this value proposition provides the ease of deployment, which is a good benefits to take away. The fourth key point here is cost effective, right? Using latest technology, both in space and ground infrastructure, to be able to deliver, you get more out of the spectrum itself, more megabits for the megahertz itself. So just to illustrate what I mean by this is by packing more people into a mini van itself. So with better technology itself, you can pack more people, hence the transportation of the people itself, you're able to deliver more with the same allocated time and resources, right? So the last and most important point here itself in the value proposition is we are an experienced satellite solution provider. Majority of the management has more than 25 years in this industry. We have worked across various key satellite operators in this region, and to illustrate that we know what we are doing, we build and we operate similar services in other parts of Southeast Asia as well. Quickly running through this diagram to illustrate how a site can be connected. From the left, right, we have sites distributed across Philippines, pointed and transmit receive signal from K1. These signals are then downloaded into Subic, a 9-meter antenna primary, and then it's connected to the VSAT infrastructure here itself, and then it decodes the signal into packets of data and connected back to the bank HQ, right? And this is via a dedicated lease line or any types of secure connectivity itself. And the system here in Subic itself is monitored 24/7 by a team of qualified engineers. Going to into a little bit detail. These data packets carried across the secure line can be operated either in layer 3 routing or various other network layer configuration to enable the data packet from the remote terminals delivered from one end to another safely and secure. The diagram here also shows that the satellite connectivity need not only be seen to connect to underserved, but also may act as a backup or complements an existing terrestrial network itself. Finally, my last slide. Just to illustrate the key points of Kacific value proposition again. Firstly, immediate coverage over Philippines. We provide high-speed and reliable connectivity. 2, we use latest proven technology to increase the link availability of the service itself. 3, the technology is proven and has been deployed with network systems to meet many corporate and finance industries' best practices. We are compliant with PCI DSS itself, which is a payment credit card data security standards. The fourth point is we're scalable. We are able to operate starting off with a small bandwidth, 2 megabits, 3 megabits, and able to expand to 10, 15, 20 even up to 50 or 100 megabits per site itself with ease, right? And the fifth point is the remote equipment it's just simple to deploy itself, the ease of deployment. And finally, the sixth point is for you guys to take away is we are using innovative technologies to provide cost savings, which is very important to the end customer without compromising the reliability and security. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, John, for that very interesting presentation. And with that, we have come towards the tail end of our program, where we'll be opening the floor for our executive Q&A. At this point, I would like to call on screen once again our speakers, Mr. Mel, Jose, Edsel, and John, to address some of the questions that we have from our audience. We do have the Q&A feature, as you can see on Zoom, and we have a couple of questions coming in. And to open our Q&A portion of today's program, we do have a general question that we'd like to address to Mr. Edsel. Is the Philippines ready for this type of technology, the satellite-based internet, to achieve more robust internet connectivity, particularly in remote and far-flung areas? Over to you.
Thank you, Gino. Nice question, by the way. To me, there is no country that is not ready for this. First of all, it's about the availability of the technology, and we just announced, and Mr. John earlier also announced about the availability across the Philippines and even in our maritime areas. So it's not only for the land-based customers, even for the maritime customers as well. And we have started engaging some of our shipping lines that belong in our market. And in fact, that is really the intent, to make it pervasive across all, really part of our campaign to democratize the technology in the Philippines, democratize internet being tagged as a basic human right already, okay, the right to information. And to me, it's rather not being ready, but these are actually all decided by which particular use case are we talking about? What is our intent of making this happen? And is there really a political will of our companies to do the transformation? And these are all triggered initially by the internet and the cloudification of our resources and all the stuff. And that will definitely, with that, we'll definitely be able to serve the underbanked and the unbanked.
Thank you for that, Edsel. We do have a question in the Q&A from Leilani Kapule. Her question is, can you cite specific BSP initiatives for the financial inclusion of unbanked and underbanked portions of the Philippine population to be depositors of banks, for instance? Can we address this question to Sir Mel? Would you like to take this question?
Yeah, as you know, as I mentioned earlier during the presentation, we have already been undertaking several initiatives to further expand financial inclusion in the Philippines. I think for over a decade now. No? So we have issued, let's say, we have our basic deposit accounts, which allows Filipinos, of course, to open an account. I think for 50 pesos, they can open a deposit account. We have also liberalized some KYC requirements so that it can cater to some customers with certain, those that have challenges when it comes to providing certain, documents for identification. We have also been, I think the most recent one was our digital banking framework, wherein we have already allowed six digital banks to offer financial products end-to-end using digital platforms. And soon, with our open finance roadmap, we expect to further expand access to bespoke financial products and services.
Thank you for that, Mel. We have another question here in the chat box. Do you envision the satellite technology eventually replacing the fiber cables everywhere in a way sort of disrupting the telecom or broadband business? Maybe we can address this question to John.
Very interesting question. I think in this region itself, the challenges is when you lay a fiber there's a lot of hurdles to actually just lay a fiber itself. So if I were to say that actually that will satellite be able to replace it today? Yes. In the future, no. Why today itself? I think again going back that satellite it's very easy to deploy itself. Quick. You can actually put a 1.2 meter antenna between one place to another, and you get your service up itself. But laying a fiber between place A to place B, and some of the places in this region itself, it can be a challenge. It takes, because you need to navigate through the existing infrastructure that you have itself, the digging of roads and all that itself. So those are challenges that if we immediately itself, I think satellite plays a key role. Not taking, but complementing the existing terrestrial infrastructure itself today. If you talk about satellite a few years back, itself, the conventional type, not the high throughput satellite that Kacific operators, the price points may be a challenge. But today with Kacific and HTS technology, the price points enable us to compete even with some of the terrestrial infrastructure today itself, right? So I say that we are disrupting in areas that we are operating in at the moment itself. So because the fiber laying is going to take time for some of these cities.
So much, John. We do have a question here. For maybe we can address this question to Mr. Jose Paulo Palileo. The question is: do you think the thrift or rural banks will easily adapt to this kind of technology, the satellite-based internet, that will definitely help bridge the gap between remote areas and the internet point of presence in the Philippines?
Yeah, actually, as already pointed out, that's the direction that banks have to take. It's not really a choice anymore. They have to go online. They have to digitalize. And considering the state of the existing infrastructure, this is a viable option for them to connect. And it's not far-fetched considering that the costs have also been more democratized versus the past. So I'm pretty sure this is going to be something that rural banks and thrift banks, even cooperative banks and NGOs will probably use and engage in.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Paolo. So we have another question here in the Q&A. What is the solution to offer democratization of the unbanks and underbanks? Can we address this question to Edsel?
Okay, from the technology perspective, we're helping the banks, basically, whether that's a rural bank or even the digital banks. And I'm glad to share with you that we very much engaged already, especially with the new digital banks and the neobanks, right? Just early this morning, been talking to two neobanks about how we can help them, not only in providing the internet, but making it possible to ensure that the security of their systems. And the democratization to the underbanks and banks are basically not only about the internet, but making these technology more affordable to even the small players, even the smaller banks. And that is when I mentioned earlier about the carefully curating the internet routes to make it sure that whatever you're paying is exactly what is only you're needing. We cannot give you one bucket of services that you will only be using a specific type. Cybersecurity, for example, it may be off topic for our internet via satellite. Cybersecurity, for example, I'm glad to announce to everybody that starting next year, this is the first in the Philippines. By default, Eastern Internet is protected against DDoS by default. And that's the only and the first ever in the country. And that is the democratization, making it affordable to everybody. Who doesn't want to have your internet protected anyway, right? Everybody would want that. But the anti-DDoS protection, for example, is considered to be still a niche solution that only the big enterprises may be able to afford it. But we are trying to steer away. And after reviewing the different cost drivers, after reviewing the different potential partners, we promised the market that we will make it happen towards the end of the first quarter of next year. Cloud infrastructure, for example, you don't necessarily have to have your own tier 3 data center in order for you to experience a telco grade IT infrastructure, right? there are some questions about cloudifying your resources to any other public cloud outside the Philippines. That's not anymore an issue today because we have good internet quality. But for those who are also concerned about the data sovereignty, the democratization of IT infrastructure by putting that in a public cloud locally hosted in the Philippines, like the Eastern Cloud, not only the first, also another first in the Philippines to have a geo-redundant, the real geo-redundant locally hosted public cloud in the country. That is a democratization and empowering the rural banks, empowering the banks and all other segments of the industry will make it happen to serve this bank, the bank, unbanked and the underbanked.
So we have a few more questions that we will be able to take given the time that we have left for today's program. I think this question can be addressed to Sir Mel. The question is, what advice can BSP give to banks in dealing with the available IDs of this sector of the population, such as merely barangay IDs, for instance, in view of the absence of birth certificates so that they cannot avail of other acceptable government IDs? Over to you, Mel.
Yeah. Yeah, Gino, I mentioned earlier that we have already issued several regulations about liberalizing the requirements to open accounts. And right now, mere barangay certification is already acceptable to open an account. Another approach would be to take the route of opening a restricted account. So when a client opens a restricted account, the client only needs to provide certain information like, of course, name, address, date of birth, and the institution has to take a photo of the client and to get the signature or thumbprint. And the submission of ID can happen 12 months after. So there's a possibility that, I mean, the deferral of the submission of ID is possible.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mel. So I think we have time for just one more question. So this one is a commercial question, I think, that we can address to Mr. Edsel. From Freddy Julkanain, does Kacific have authorized dealers in Tawi-Tawi, Philippines?
We are the authorized dealer wherever you are, and we can serve wherever your branches are. Just contact any of our account managers. I think one of our marketing officers has responded or will be responding to your query on how to contact Eastern. So we have a wide array of service partners who can help us out, not only in the installation, but also in the support, doing the after-sales support. So again, from Apari hanggang Bolo or Tawi-Tawi, yeah, we are there.
Okay, so I think, yeah, thank you so much, Eds, for that. We do have, I think, one nice question that we would like to also answer here in today's session. Does Kacific satellite internet signal is affected by strong wind or heavy rain, knowing that the Philippines always experiences typhoon? Maybe we can address this to John.
From the uplink side of the signal itself, we have diversity sites. So that's the whole purpose of building the diversity site itself. So the availability is close to 3 nines itself, if you talk about the uplink side. So the remote side it's subjected to where your location is itself. So I would say that in terms of physics, yes, you are subjected to heavy rain. But so far, based on the 2,000 sites we have deployed over in the Philippines itself, the customers has been fairly satisfied with the service that we've been providing itself. And it is something that I think is with the frequency that we use, it is subjected to rain fade. But we do have the technology, like what I mentioned earlier itself, to reduce the impact of this link availability. Unlike the previous technology where you rain, it will completely go off. So this particular technology will be able to sustain the link a little bit more longer, and therefore actually the impact to your service is less compared to the older technology itself. I hope I answered that question.
Okay, thank you so much, John. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so I think that would wrap up now our Q&A portion of today's webinar. While we have our speakers on screen, I would like to invite everyone to do a quick photo op with the speakers. I would like to call on the technical team back end to just do a quick screenshot. and I will do a countdown for us. Okay, so in 3, 2, 1. All right, so I hope we're able to get that screenshot. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much to our speakers. And you may now turn off your video cameras while we officially close today's webinar. I would like to now call on screen the head of sales of Eastern Communications to give our closing remarks. Mr. Michael Castañeda, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Gino. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we heard a lot of things, or a lot of insights from our excellent speakers. They examined the challenges that the banking and financial institutions are facing and reflected on the opportunities to serve the unbanked and underbanked. Plus, of course, discussed the current state of connectivity services in our country. Eastern Communications recognizes the evolving business requirements of the markets we serve. We understand the challenges that businesses are facing in this current situation. We are one with the government's call to provide connectivity to the underserved and unserved areas, which is why we continue to aggressively expand our network and partnered with Kacific to provide visa and other services. This partnership shows or allows us to reach more areas and create services with better value to our customers. So thank you, Kacific, for this opportunity. It's really our pleasure. Eastern Communications is not just a full-service telecommunications company. We also provide relevant ICT solutions to help our customers adjust to the new business practices in this post-pandemic landscape. You can rely on Eastern Communications to present solutions that are unique, creative, and customized to your specific needs to ensure that your business performs at its best so you can stay in control and on top of your game. Whether you are in banking, retail and distribution, government, and even as a service company. Please do approach us. Later on, we will give you our contact details on how you can reach us. Let's talk about your business needs. Find pain points, solutions, and efficiencies, and how we can help you reach your goals. Eastern Communications, with our human connection, our high-tech and high-touch service, is always here to assist you. Once again, thank you very much for sharing your time with us this afternoon. God bless us all. Back to you, Gino. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. So thank you again to all of our speakers, of course, to our guests for your time and for all the great questions you brought up today. This is to close today's webinar, Connecting the Unbanked and Underbanked in the Philippines, a joint webinar between Eastern Communications and Kacific Broadband Satellites Group. Have a great day, everyone.